teen years as an active female athlete, your nutrition is being influenced by the fact that you're going through puberty and this is the second most rapid time period of growth in your entire life. And that is why, when it comes down to it, why enough calories is so incredibly important, because of all the growth that's happening.
Lindsey, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while.
Yeah, so much has gone on, but I appreciate the invite to come back, and congratulations on growing your podcast and your channel. You're doing an amazing job.
I really appreciate it. And I was actually looking back to the last episode you were on, and I think it was an episode we did diving deep on fats and why female athletes need them. I think it was on fats. Yeah. And then we did one before that, just going over general nutrition for female athletes. So I'll link those episodes in the caption below so you guys can catch up. But Lindsey is a registered dietitian to female athletes. She also hosts the Female Athlete Nutrition podcast, which I'll also link in the show notes. And today's topic is very, very niche for teenage female athletes, and really just helping parents navigate the nutrition world and ensuring their teenage female athlete is getting enough calories and fueling properly to match the demands and expenditure in their sport. So I have all of what we're going to go over today. So I guess we can just start with, what are some of the nutrition priorities for teenagers specifically?
Right. Yes. So you mentioned this is a niche topic, and it is, but then again, when you think about like when are athletes super dedicated to their sport, it's usually developing in their teen years and then like college. And then we see another big like drop off because we might stay active. I know you and I have stayed active as female athletes our entire lives, but like, as far as being like really active and competing, it's like those high school, preteen, high school, college years. And so I actually think this is incredibly important when we talk about female athletes' nutrition. It's like starting during these teen years, getting a good foundation, sets you up for success for your future, but also might be like the time that it really matters, right? As far as performance goes. So it's a niche topic. And then again, it's like so many female athletes need it during this time. And when I think about for teenagers, specifically just adolescent years, so when it comes to nutrition, I know this sounds so basic, but we'll talk about why it's important. Just like overall calories is super important. And then we actually also want to highlight protein a little bit more. I'll dive into why. And then from a micronutrient standpoint, calcium and iron. So those are our 4 nutrients that I really want to hit on today as being priorities. Other things are also incredibly important, but those are like when we think about teenage years. Total calories, protein, calcium, iron stand out compared to other life stages. But one more thing on top of that is like teenage years, this is a time for autonomy, self-discovery, your identity, and social interactions. And all of those things obviously influence your nutrition choices as well and your behaviors around food. So I think this is, we can kind of sprinkle that into our conversation today as well, about how all of that influences health and nutrition for a teenager.
I love that
you just dive into it.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I want to dive deeper into the micronutrients you mentioned, yes. But maybe let's start with protein first, and then we'll get into calcium and iron and everything else.
So the reason I said like calories and protein is like super important is because your teenage years it's the second most rapid time of growth in your life. So you've got from age 0 to 2 is the most rapid growth in anybody's life, right? Like a little baby is born and they triple their birth weight in a year, which is like massive. Think about your weight right now. And if in 1 year you just tripled it, like that's massive, right? So 0 to 2 is like incredibly important for development and growth. And then like throughout childhood, it's like this steady growth, but then it's your teenage years. That's where we see super rapid growth again in height, in stature, in bone content, in muscles, and growing hormones. And this is also where male and female starts to differentiate. So as far as like health and training and nutrition goes, like there's really no differences between boys and girls until we hit puberty. That's when some changes happen. So that's going to be around your teenage years. That could be between like as young as 10 to 13 for the start of puberty, but puberty itself is a few years long to really complete that process. So let's say you start puberty at 12, you might not finish it as a girl until like 16, 17. So your whole teen years as an active female athlete, your nutrition is being influenced by the fact that you're going through puberty, and this is the second most rapid time period of growth in your entire life. And that is why, when it comes down to it, why enough calories and enough protein is so incredibly important, because of all the growth that's happening. So that's important for any teenager, but now we add on your training on top of it. And the teenagers of today are training quite a lot and quite seriously. I mean, I remember back in my day, by high school, I was training 20 hours a week, and I wasn't even like, I was a good athlete, but there's girls out there now, and girls and boys out there now that are like doing way more intensely, or specializing, or they're committing to college in their junior year. Like, it's just like, I think that the intensity of sports has really ramped up. So we see this convergence of, hey, nutrients and growth and development is so important during this time period of life, but also I'm expending so much through sport. Also, I'm trying to build muscle. I'm not just trying to build for growth. I'm trying to build for sport. That's where we just need a lot of calories. And there's actually no good like equation, because research and studies on a younger population is more complicated ethically. So we don't have any, like when we look up how many calories do I need in a day, and we do these equations based off height, weight, gets a lot more tricky with a teen athlete because they're still growing. What is their end height? We can't just input that into an equation. So we have some guidelines that maybe a female teen athlete might need between 2,200 up to 4,000 calories. That's a huge range, right? And then when are you going through a growth spurt? You might go through a growth spurt for 3 months. And during times of growth spurt, which you can't identify, oh, it's happening today. You don't know when it's happening. It's kind of in hindsight. Oh my gosh, I just grew 2 inches, right? It's in hindsight. But during growth spurts, teen athletes might need an extra like 500 calories a day just to accommodate for the growth spurt. That's an entire extra meal. Right. And so even though I can't give great guidance on a podcast as to how many calories somebody should eat, I just want to stress the importance of enough calories during this time period. And how are we going to get enough calories? It's going to be through eating full, complete meals, not skipping meals, having some snacks. And, but these are also, it gets into like, this is where teenagers struggle. They're sleeping in because they're tired, and then rushing off to school without getting breakfast or having a bar for breakfast. It's like, we're already behind. Or our snacks are like a package of goldfish. Like, that's not going to cut it, right? So that's where like I really want to stress that we do need enough calories with like complete meals, not skipping meals, packing snacks, being intentional. And then to extend beyond that, where do we want our calories from? Well, we do want a little bit of everything, of course, but protein needs actually are higher in teenagers compared to, let's say, an adult population. I'm going to throw some numbers out here, and I don't mean to be confusing, but I just kind of want to highlight it. So the recommended dietary allowance for protein in adults is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which in my experience as a dietitian, I've never had that work for anybody. It's far too low. Like that's such a small amount of protein, and that's never worked. Definitely not for athletes. So sports nutrition guidelines are going to be more like maybe 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilogram. But as a sports dietitian, I've also had many scenarios where I'm recommending like 2 grams per kilogram, maybe even 2.2 grams per kilogram. There's been a few unique scenarios of even higher protein amounts as well. So for athletes, we are going to recommend those higher amounts. And I'll say, just for general population, I would recommend a higher amount than 0.8 grams per kilogram as well. But now we look at teenagers. What do teenagers need? Flat out, not even being an athlete, 2 grams per kilogram per day.
Wow.
So that just goes to show, because of how much growth and development they're doing, the fact that they need that protein to build their muscle, to build their hormones, to support their bone growth. Not even being an athlete, you need 2 grams per kilogram. That's like the amount that we normally recommend for an adult athlete, right? So that really highlights how much growth is going on. And again, Actually, I did the math earlier just so I wouldn't choke up doing math while I was talking to you, but I'm just going to throw numbers out there because grams per kilogram. So if you have a teenager that's 100 pounds, 2 grams per kilogram would be about 90 grams of protein a day. If you have a teenager that's 150 pounds, it would be around 136 grams of protein a day. Meat in the middle, 125 pounds, 113 grams of protein. So you can kind of see, obviously, we've got a wide range of weights. And again, teenagers are growing, so that number can change. But I'm throwing that out there because to me as a sports dietitian, and maybe to you as well, Erica, as an adult, like 90 to 136 grams of protein a day might sound normal.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we think about, well, what are teenagers usually doing? And like I mentioned before, they're maybe skipping breakfast or like school lunch, having packaged snacks. They're probably not getting enough protein. And so I think this is really important to highlight that we do need to make an intentional effort to get some more quality protein in these teen athlete diets in order to get what they need for sport and for their normal growth and development. I'll pause because I just rambled quite a bit.
I feel this episode could only be dedicated to this for 90 minutes because I have so many questions. So let's come back to the example of the 100-pound athlete who needs 90 grams of protein. Yeah. Let's say, best case scenario, they do eat breakfast. Normally, it's the good old, I had a bar. Right. How many grams of protein are in a bar? Maybe 6 to 8?
5, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Let's say 6. Okay, now for lunch, maybe they have a turkey sandwich at school. How many grams of protein is that? I'm calculating it.
Sure. If you're putting turkey cheese and you've got a good quality, like whole grain bread, you might be up to like 18.
Okay. All right. And then let's say, we're not going to include snacks yet. Let's say dinner. They have maybe a salad with chicken and some rice on the side.
They might be getting 20 to 30 there because if they've got like a whole chicken breast, like 3 to 4 ounces, you're going to be above 20 grams. And then even protein does sneak in there. Even broccoli has some protein in there. So yeah, if they're having that complete dinner with an actual piece of meat and sides, they'll be in 20 to 30 grams. So what are we up to there?
Okay, so and like we're 50? Being nice with this because most people don't meet these basic 3 meals a day. We haven't even talked about snacks, but we are up to only 54 grams of protein of the 90 that are required for this 100-pound athlete. So a bar ain't gonna cut it for breakfast.
Right. Right.
You probably want to add a few eggs to that or something else. But yeah, it's just so crazy. It puts it perspective calculating all this while we're recording. So parents understand the deficiencies that they're already in. And most commonly, a lot of girls aren't eating breakfast. So we were at around 55 grams of protein. That would probably take them down to in the 40s. And they're not even halfway to their goal yet, which is even more concerning.
Exactly. And that's why, I think we do live as, adults listening, and you and I, we live in a world that's, I believe, really pushing protein. And I'm one of those dietitians that's like, don't forget about carbs because carbs are important for athletes. And don't forget about fats. You need all those fats too. Those, let's be choosing whole fat yogurt and eat your nuts. But also, like, protein is so important. And this population isn't, because they're teenagers, like, we can say that, we can argue this for lots of age groups, but I think because they're teenagers, skipping meals, grabbing packaged things is a lot more natural for them. And it takes effort to add the protein. You have to cook the meat. You have to cook the eggs. And that's what teenagers aren't necessarily doing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let's before we go into just strategies of how to get all this in amidst busy schedules and just the life of an athlete and the parents, let's quickly go over calcium and iron.
So here to calcium are, by age 18, like 95% of your bone mineral content should be formed. So the importance of calcium in combination with vitamin D as well throughout these teenage years is so important because once after that, I don't want to say there's no hope, but your body isn't as like primed to grow bone as you are older. So you want to make sure that you're growing it when you're younger, because this will come back to bite you, whether you're getting diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis at a young age, or like getting stress fractures in college, right? So we really want to make sure that we're getting enough. And again, calories and protein help with this, and then calcium and vitamin D. So the calcium requirements during your teenage years is 1,300 milligrams a day, which is higher than it is for adults. Adults are recommended around 1,000. So, have your beliefs that you want about milk, but I'm going to use milk as an example. Back when I grew up, there was a big push of like 3 glasses of milk a day. Well, the reason is because a glass of milk, 8 ounces of milk, has about 300 milligrams of calcium. So if you have 3 glasses of milk, you're still only getting 900 milligrams. You're not even at your recommended amount. 1,300 milligrams actually can be challenging to get. So again, I'm going to go back to my number one recommendation of we need to make sure we're eating enough, because calcium is certainly found in more foods than just milk or dairy. So it's in milk, it's in your cheese, it's in your yogurt. But we can get it in dark leafy greens, kale, collard greens, spinach, broccoli, teenagers' favorite foods, right? You also can get it in some like almonds are surprisingly decent up them, chia seeds as well. I'm going to throw tofu in there because it's treated with calcium, and then like fortified products. So as much as I'm like, we need to maybe be careful of too many, like can't just have cereal for breakfast, but actually you can get some decent cereals that are fortified with calcium. So that is a good option to throw in the mix of your diet. But again, you can see like so many people are like, oh yeah, I have dairy. Like I'll have, milk with dinner, and I had cheese on my sandwich and a little Greek yogurt cup. But you actually add that up, and, milk for dinner is 300 milligrams. A Greek yogurt cup actually is only like, how much is it? Might be 100, maybe 125. A slice of cheese on your sandwich, that's not that much, like 50. Like we might only be at 500 milligrams. So just because you eat dairy doesn't mean you're reaching your calcium goal. So this is another thing that I think actually takes intention. And I do think that dairy makes it easier to incorporate that in, because that's a lot of broccoli you've got to eat otherwise, but you can get it done if you don't love dairy. And fortunately, like soy milks and almond milks are fortified with calcium as well. But again, that just like the protein example, it's like, ooh, this actually takes effort to reach our calcium goal of 1,300 milligrams a day. And then do you have any comments, or do you want me to move on to iron?
Yeah, we can move on. I will say, I think milk is so amazing. And I remember growing up, I drank so much milk. Like it was crazy, but really glad I did. And again, if you can tolerate it and have dairy, then go for it. I mean, it's tasty, it's good. You can have chocolate milk. It's really great.
I'm obsessed with dairy. That's one reason I know I could never be vegan. I can't give up
I love
dairy.
cheese.
God, I could live off of it. But I'm going to go back to even earlier how we were like, so many female athletes are skipping breakfast or just grabbing a bar. It's like, can we have a glass of milk with it so that we get calcium, we get some protein, we get more calories in there? Like that's why I love dairy, because like milk and yogurt, it's like, it's quick, it's accessible. You don't have to prep it. So like that's amazing. And then also
and string cheese too, the quick string cheese and stuff at Starbucks you can even get.
Yes.
I mean, it's everywhere. So
it's everywhere. And then even with milk, they have, they call it UHP, ultra high pasteurization, that makes the milk shelf stable. So just as far as transporting or like throwing it in your bag, or maybe college athletes like keeping these milks like stored in your dorm room. I used to do that, keep them stored, you don't have much space in your dorm room, but like underneath my bed, I would have those ultra high pasteurized milks. Like common brands do this, and this is how protein shakes as well. They're not adding preservatives, by the way. This is a pasteurization process that removes the bacterial growth. And so that's really, I think, convenient. I think dairy is really convenient way to get protein, calories in, and now the calcium as well.
All right, I'm going to have a sip of my milk real quick.
And then,
chocolate milk.
I drink milk all the time. And then I have 2 children, and I remember like being pregnant and then breastfeeding. I was like, I need more calories. I would just chug milk.
It's a great easy way to add more calories. And if it's chocolate milk, a lot of teenagers love chocolate milk. It's tasty.
Yes,
so I like what you said about shelf stable, and even some of like the Fairlife and Core Life products. You can get them at room temperature. which is
Yes.
amazing. You
Yeah.
don't always have to like pack a cooler and take an extra step, which is
Right.
awesome. My girls love the Fairlife. Like,
I do too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really solid.
And there's other generic versions that might
Mhm.
be a cheaper cost that are just might say like higher protein. And I also want to throw in there like lactose intolerance is common, but there's a wide variety of what that looks like. You can get lactose free milk, you can get the lactate milk. And then that's where, our plant based milks are certainly, we've got tons of options on the market and they are at least still a good choice for the calcium. I am a big fan of like soy milk because you're getting the protein there versus almond milk, not so much. There's some pea protein milks out there now too. So there's lots of options that can still, like, even if you're like, I can't tolerate dairy, like, I think still this idea of like a plant based milk to get your calcium and look at that
Mhm.
protein content though and calories as well. So, and that portable idea that we were just talking about too.
Awesome. Let's move on to iron. I know this is a big one, especially when we're talking about female athletes and their specific needs. So,
Yeah. So again, your needs for iron throughout childhood are pretty like similar between boys and girls, and then it mostly increases, theoretically increases for both boys and girls throughout teenage years because of that growth and needing like more red blood cells, and then you're becoming more active, potentially engaging in your sport more, and so just more oxygen transfer. But once girls start menstruating and we have monthly blood loss, then we have a higher need for iron as well to replenish what's lost. So your needs jump from childhood of 8 milligrams a day to adolescence, more like 15 milligrams per day of iron. And then actually adult women do need more, about 18 milligrams a day. And that's because during your teenage years, I know you've had episodes, and I think I've even talked about like the menstrual cycle for female athletes on your podcast before, but I want to stress, I definitely want to stress the importance of a regular menstrual cycle, but also it's not like you get your period and it's regular right away. So it is expected that adult women have more iron loss through their menstrual cycle than teenage girls, just because the menstrual cycle is not quite regular yet. I say that with caution because I don't want you to assume that if it's irregular, you're fine. Like, but it does take time to establish normal. Um, okay, I won't go down too much of a rabbit hole there, but that's why you need 15 milligrams a day. And man, if I start giving you the numbers, like 3 ounces of chicken actually only has 1 milligram of iron in it.
right.
That's
So,
not very
yeah, I was going to ask what food should they be focusing on to meet those iron needs?
yeah. So I do, if you can, if you can keep, if you're a parent watching, if you can keep your teenager eating meat, I think is really important. I'm not anti vegan or vegetarian diets, but I do think for growth and development, getting iron through meat is going to be a lot easier throughout these teenage years because it does take a lot of effort and intention to get enough iron on a plant based diet. And that's probably something that isn't going to come easy to a 12-year-old. Um, and I've seen a lot more success in adolescent athletes that are eating meat. So that's going to be really helpful. And red meat is going to be your biggest source of iron. So whenever you can sneak that in whatever ways, whether it's steak or ground beef or a hamburger, having that a couple times a week would be great. But there are other sources, and I don't want to knock the plant-based sources, but you just might need to be a little like creative. So, let's see, like the skin of potatoes has iron in it. Raisins have iron. Dried apricots have iron. Some nuts are a good source of iron. Quinoa has iron. Any like anything that's more like whole grain, like a whole grain bread might have a little bit of iron compared to a white bread. I'm not anti white bread, but we're trying to choose foods that we can sneak in this iron because it's so important. And again, teenage athletes too, like they're tired all the time. They might be, not getting enough sleep, which, is a big problem across all age categories, but we really want to, like, they're just still kids and they're developing and their brains are developing, and we need them to have energy to do all these things that they want to do as they're developing into young adults. And so we really need that iron to get it in. So meat, but red meat, any meat, if you can choose, like when it comes to poultry, like incorporating some chicken thighs or some wings in there, some dark meat is good. Um, Fish has a little bit as well. So you can go for that. And then being like, I think like trail mixes are a good idea because you sneak in those nuts and seeds and dried fruit that ends up having a lot of iron too.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's quite a variety they can put together, but they really need to pay attention to the amount of iron they're getting because it's definitely a lot less than what they think. So it's
It
so
probably
crazy, like
is.
when you say the numbers out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And sometimes I'm like, well, how did I survive?
Right. Well, I don't know if I did.
And I will say when I think back to my childhood, part of me is like, my adolescent years, I'm like, yeah, how did I survive? Well, I could have been better. But also,
Yeah.
I will say that our like the nutrition culture has changed so much. And like when I grew up, like I I don't know, we were eating family dinners and I did have like full complete meals and like some of that has changed culturally. Also, like there's a bigger push for like plant-based diets and with social media, girls can be a lot more influenced to diet during their teenage years or cut calories or count calories. Whereas a lot of some people started that in their teenage years, but I think a lot of athletes weren't even exposed to that 20 years ago. They didn't have food tracking apps, and now they are exposed to it. And so you can very easily go down the wrong path
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting with the plant-based diets, and I've talked to some girls about it, and I asked their reason why, because if it's a moral reason, then totally understand, do that, it's okay, but usually it's not, and the reason they
Yeah.
give me is because they don't want to get bulky from all the protein and meat and animal-based
Oh,
sources, or they feel like the vegan diet, they're gonna be, like, lean and toned and skinny, and that's a more common
wow.
reason of going vegan than the moral argument. I get the moral argument, like, do you on that
Yeah.
one, but most girls are chasing veganism for weight loss, which is not okay.
No. No, I agree with you there. I think eating meat is going to be a great healthy option for your muscles, for your development, for your brain, for your iron intake, for your protein needs, for your sport needs. So I think there's no like I'm never gonna say like this is the right way to eat because it's different for everybody. Everybody's body is unique. But I would say for the majority of developing teens, I would strongly encourage eating meat if it comes down to health. And even the moral argument, I'll speak to this for just a moment, but because I've run into girls that I'm like, they have those ethical reasons. And yet I have to point out to them, hey, you know, you're caring about these other ethical things, but like, and I appreciate that. I love where your heart is, but you're not taking care of yourself. And how can you save the world when you can't even save yourself? And
Right.
really want to encourage them, hey, you need to make sure that you can take care of yourself first in order to be an advocate for other people or things or plants or animals. And that we might still be able to work within a plant-based approach, but like always keep that in mind. And what if you could get some free range eggs from a local farm and incorporate those in? Maybe that's a choice. And so a lot of teens as well, they are they're some of the most passionate people because this is a time in their life when they're really like finding that sense of self and they're learning and things matter to them now. We just float through childhood, la di da, just want to play on swings all day. And then suddenly it's like, as a teenager, it's like your eyes are opened to all these things in the world, all the things you want to accomplish, all the things you want to do. And so I love that they're passionate about certain topics, but also they still need to be educated about it. And so, I think that's something where parents, if you have a child that is exploring plant-based diets or veganism, like explore that with them and really learn all about it. To learn where, it's not just, oh, I'm going to do this right away because somewhere online said it, but like learn about it, learn about sustainable farming, learn about sustainable raising of animals and see kind of where that lands to make a decision and also compare it to their health because yeah, I've had lots of clients over the years that I'm like, okay, I love where your heart is, but you're struggling.
Yeah.
You're exhausted. Your ferritin is low. You're not able to compete how your coach expects you to. This is now rocking your confidence. Like, You need to
Yeah.
start prioritizing. And this is a lesson for teenagers as well, to prioritize what really matters in their life.
Yeah. Well, that could also be a whole separate podcast, but
Mhm.
maybe one day we'll have Lindsey back on that one. Let's move on to how parents can really intervene and help, because I love that parents, listen to our podcast, or they might hire a dietitian, which is awesome, but they also have to be a part of that nutrition team. Even if they're working
Yeah.
with you, they live with their teenage daughter. They
Oh,
go
yeah.
grocery shopping with her or without her. They might help pack her lunch or cook the meals. So, how can parents help amidst all the craziness and sports going on and school schedules and extracurriculars? How can they help make sure that girls are eating enough and getting these nutrients in?
So I mentioned earlier that teenage years are really important to have that sense of self, establish autonomy. And I'm not a parent of teenagers yet. I do have little kids, but they're much younger. And so I'm getting glimpses of how difficult parenthood is. And then I've worked with so many teenagers over the years. And so I know that it's hard. And I'm, like I said, my oldest is only 3. I have a 3 and a 1.5-year-old, but like parenting is hard. Like you're constantly learning and it's so challenging. So I can only imagine how hard it's got to be to raise teenagers. But I think the important thing is to always like stay involved when it comes to the food piece. Um, Children eat what you put in front of them. And so hopefully up until teenage years, you've done a decent job at putting decent food in front of them. And I know that takes learning for some people because some adults never learned how to eat decently. So how do you start feeding your kids? So I know that's not always easy for everybody, but hopefully um childhood you've created a decent food environment. Just keep doing that throughout their teenage years. They're going to stray from it. They're going to say, "Mom, I don't like that." They're going to say, "Dad, I'm going out with my friends." And you've got to make some boundaries based on how you raise your children, but they're going to eat the food you put in front of them less and less and less, or establish their own thoughts about it and opinions about it. But just keep providing that food in the house because they still think there's a lot of parents. What I've seen too is like parents are busy. Maybe since your kid is in school, maybe you don't have a stay at home parent anymore and both parents are working now. So it's like you both parents come home from work and they're tired and I was just going to order a pizza, or okay, everybody's figure out what they do for dinner. I've met so like I did grow up in a household where my mom was a stay at home mom until I went back to college. So she cooked dinners every night of the week. I thought that was normal. I'm realizing that was not normal. There's so many families out there that the teenagers are figuring food out for themselves. And this can be challenging. So as a parent, sorry, my tip to get back to here, as a parent, if you can still at a minimum try and provide a dinner for your child, that would be amazing. And I know that that doesn't mean like you're still allowed to do Grubhub if you have to, that's okay, but try and provide a dinner. And then I think also getting those snacks in the house, like that weekly or biweekly grocery shopping trip that you're doing to get snacks, some of the foods I just mentioned, that the dairy, the higher protein foods, like some meat sticks, some like decent quality cereals that have some protein and fiber in them. And I would also encourage you to bring your teen athlete with you. So again, so many of us are going to do pick up groceries or delivery, or maybe you are going to go to the store when your kids are at school because that's the easier time. And I would strongly encourage you to find time to make a family trip with your child to the grocery store with your teenager, be it on a weekend or after school, so that they can be involved in that process of meal planning, meal prepping, choosing the foods, budgeting, like all of that. Because look, then they're going to go off to college and they're going to have no clue. They're going to be like, "What? Eggs are expensive? I had no clue." So like they're going to be hit with both a nutritional issue and a financial issue. So incorporate them in this with you. You as a parent, like have some ideas for dinner, but let them pick dinners as well. Maybe you guys, research once a month, like, hey, let's try a new recipe once a month together. You have to get them in the kitchen. I realize too how many teenagers don't have any cooking skills. And I think I'm going to reflect on my own journey. I had an interest in food as a teenager. So I began to, and I also worked my first jobs in restaurants. I realized people who don't work in restaurants like get no cooking experiences. And so I think this is another thing too, where it is a parent's responsibility to still make sure that we've got decent quality food in the house. Can we have a family dinner? There's a lot of research to support the benefits of family dinners. And going back to how we started this podcast with that protein example, it was like they got a good chunk of their protein from having a dinner, right? So that's huge. So do your best with family dinner. Buy snacks that are decent quality, have the iron, have the calcium, have the protein for them to choose, and then incorporate them in the grocery shopping. Ask them what they want to eat, work with them on that, bring them along with you so that they can start being exposed and see the importance of it. Was that your question? I just kept
Yeah.
talking.
No, that was perfect, and it
Okay.
really just going over the parent involvement in all this, and it is a lot of discipline and work
Yeah.
because you have to kinda plan out those meals and be prepared with all those snacks, with all the activity that they're doing, but my question for parents is, would you rather deal with the cost of working at the nutrition and the prep than the cost of your girl being underfueled and at a higher risk for
Yeah.
injury or bone loss? And it's like, well, the cost of discipline sounds a lot better because
Yeah.
you want to set her up for success, especially during adolescence where she's still growing. So it's worth it.
Yes. I have hold on, I wrote this down. Sorry for the long pause. Oh yes, because this is really important. So I want to kind of talk through this a little bit. It is important to make nutrition a priority, have some discipline, provide the food, involve them with it. At the same time, I already mentioned like teenager is expected to rebel against that a little bit. So we certainly don't want to force them into anything because that never works. They're just, you need to start eating healthy. They're going to do the exact opposite. They're going to go to McDonald's that day. They're going to get a milkshake that day, right? And so we don't want to shame any food because, again, there's social aspects to that. It's important for them to go get a milkshake with their girlfriends and socialize. Like there is so many more reasons to eat. We want them to make their own choices. Maybe they're using their own money to go get that milkshake, and this is a good financial lesson, right? So we don't want to shame, we don't want to force them. You should only be eating these foods. We don't want to shame them for doing certain things. We want to allow them to explore. And I bring this up because the mean age for eating disorder onset is between 15 to 19 years old. So whether it be anorexia, bulimia, or just restrictive feeding disorders, and this is so and that's specifically eating disorders, but there's a lot of like the subclinical, like I'm just not eating enough, relative energy deficiency in sport. I know you've talked about that on your show before, but I just think like this is why we want to stress the importance of it without also like scaring them or shaming them for their food choices. And this also comes into play for female athletes as well that are teenagers, because with our growth and development, there's body weight gain, including body fat gain, and this is normal and this is good to gain
Mhm.
body fat during these years. And so we don't want a teen, if you as a parent are like, we have to start eating healthier, you need more protein, and then they're also like gaining weight and they're feeling insecure about that, they're going to create this tension, and the next thing you know, we've got disordered eating or eating disorders, and like we just want to create as healthy of a environment as possible. And by the way, if your child ever does struggle with an eating disorder or disordered eating, it is not your fault as a parent. It is not. There's 1,000 reasons that these things happen. But as a parent, of course, we know your heart that you want the best for your child. So we're just trying to encourage you to create as ideal of an
Mhm.
environment that fosters a good, healthy relationship with food, which is caring about treating your body well, while also allowing room for personal choice, for social eating, and things like that.
And just the reality of travel sports, and I
Yeah.
know we've talked about this before, but yes, of course, you want to nourish your body, have nutrient-dense foods, get all these macronutrients and micronutrients we were just talking about, but the reality is if you forget to pack a cooler or prepare your food for a tournament and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and a Wawa is available and a Starbucks, then yeah, you gotta lean
Go.
into convenience food at that point because the alternative
Mhm.
is not eating, which you don't wanna do. So,
Mm-mm.
you still have to be smart about it, and I think this is where the internet gets really crazy because it's all, "Oh, well, non-toxic living and, like, everything's toxic." They're starting to come at blueberries now, which is crazy, but don't hate on blueberries. But yeah, it's just nuts. And for a growing adolescent girl, it's like, okay, it's all right if she goes to the Wawa and gets a sub from there or gets a thing of
Yes.
pretzels or some
Oh
cheese.
my
Like
God.
it's
Yeah.
just like, come on, guys. Like we'd rather her
Yes.
get calories than none at all. It's crazy.
100%. And that's why that's what I opened with in this
Mhm.
conversation is calories.
Yeah.
And I know we live in a society where it seems that people are over consuming calories. And I know that childhood obesity is a problem in our country, but we're talking about active female athletes and creating a healthy relationship with food, and they are growing and developing. And if we're under fueling, if we're not getting enough calories and we're skipping meals, that is more harmful than eating a few too many calories. It truly is. And
Yeah.
even when you look at and I am going to speak specifically to an adult population because I don't know that I've looked at charts for adolescents in this topic per se, but BMI, which there's a lot of issues with that. But I just want to point out that the lowest morbidity and mortality rate is actually in an overweight BMI category.
Yeah.
The overweight BMI category is technically the healthiest in regards to morbidity and mortality. And the only reason I bring this
Right.
up is to say that a few extra pounds is nowhere near as harmful as a few too little pounds,
Yeah.
especially for a growing girl who's
Mhm.
active and trying to achieve things, and her brain is growing, her muscles are growing, her height is growing, her hormones are developing. Let her have a few extra pounds on her.
Yep. Yeah, the BMI is so terrible. It's such a disaster. And we've
It is.
talked about, yeah, it's crazy. We've talked about body comp over BMI and the number on the scale. And I would just say to everyone, just throw away your scale right now. It's just not helpful. It doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't give a picture of your health or performance. You're better off just going off of how you feel, your internal health. If maybe you're getting your hormones or blood work, your menstrual cycle regularities.
Mhm.
Are you putting on muscle mass and improving in the gym? Like just those like subjective and objective things is better than BMI or looking at a scale at just a random number.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to make this about body image right now, but I also just want because I think with internet and social media, like a teen athlete suddenly looking to her idol who's maybe like 27 years old or 25 or 32 or something, who's a pro athlete and
Mm.
has been training for 15 plus years, and they might have a certain body look or aesthetic, and then this teenager like a 14-year-old or 17-year-old might be thinking, well, I want to look like her. It's we First of all, we shouldn't be comparing our bodies to anybody, not even, our friend who's right next to us. But also, like, there's just such a difference in metabolic needs, nutritional needs, body composition, hormones between a 30-year-old and a 14-year-old. And so I think this is an issue where as teen girls are going through puberty and maybe do gain some weight as expected and as needed, and then they're feeling like, well, I don't look like a soccer player, I don't look like a track athlete, I don't, because they're comparing themselves visually to what they see on the internet of somebody who's in a totally different life stage and a totally different um, scenario. And so it's like, I really want to encourage girls. I want you to care about your health, but also like, if you, this is not the case for everybody, but honestly, some of those pro athletes, you look back at their pictures in high school and it's like, oh yeah, they did have a little extra weight on them then because you're supposed to during your
Yeah.
teenage years. You are growing and developing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And I saw an article, I think it was a couple months ago, talking about Alex Morgan's vegan diet.
Ah,
And if
yeah.
you're a young girl soccer player reading this, you're like, "Oh, I should do that too." And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, maybe it works great for Alex Morgan on where she's at or how she lives her life, but it's like thousands of young girls read that article and they might get the wrong message because Alex Morgan is a lot of girls' idols. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I knew she was vegan as well from I think I dove into that a few years ago.
Yeah, just
But I don't
recently.
know, like, I don't know when she started it. I don't know anything
No.
about her diet, so I won't pass judgment, but I will.
Yeah.
But those are questions to ask when you read that. It's like, well, when did she start it? Oh, how old is she now? So
Right.
it's, is this working for her now? That's a question, but also, did it always work for her? What did she do when she was my age? And again, we should
Right.
not be
Mhm.
copying, oh, she did this when she was my age, so I should do it. But those are just questions to ask
Yeah.
that. And this is why I think teenage nutrition is important. Like, let's get the fundamentals down. Calories, enough protein, calcium, iron, support growth and development, establish our menstrual cycle, recover from our workouts, make sure that we're learning about food. We're not labeling food as good or bad. We're making complete meals. We're in the process of grocery shopping. We're understanding how to, plan meals and take responsibility for a tournament weekend and packing our meals. Like, that's the foundation. And then as you grow in age, you can tweak things based on what works for your body.
Yeah, definitely. I think she did just recently switch to vegan when she turned 30 or late 20s. I don't think it's been throughout her whole career or as a
Yeah.
teenager. And then one other thing I'll mention with that, like following your role models online. Sometimes girls, it's not even athletes that they're following, and they're
Yeah.
following these skinny influencers who do these like what I eat in a days, and it looks like these women are getting like less than 1,000 calories a day, and I'm like, well, all these girls do is like take photos on the beach and travel to Ibiza and party their butts off. So it's like,
Hmm.
that's not you. Like, why are you even
Yeah.
trying to pay attention to these people, especially with
Yeah.
nutrition?
That, and also even people who might be athletes or fitness, but like a different sport than you. So
Yeah.
like I remember one time I figured this out with a client of mine who was a collegiate distance runner. And then I found out that like everything she was seeing online, she was following athletes, but she was following all like gym girls. Um
Oh,
and just like, or like IFBB pro type, like really like more aesthetic based or like lifting. And so like that's sport, that's cool, but like no, for distance running, you need way more carbohydrates.
yeah.
Like so it's just like, and your body, is adapting to your sport as well. And so it was just like, we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to what that person's eating because they're in a different sport than you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, the
Yeah.
bikini shows are a whole rabbit hole. So please, I mean, it's a respectable sport. They do their own thing, but it's like if you're a teenage girl playing court or field-based sports, then yeah, just don't follow these
Don't,
people right now.
don't. I
You will
agree.
save yourself. Well,
Yeah.
Lindsay, this has been fantastic. And I think this is going to give the parents and coaches listening just a lot of takeaways to help their female athletes to fuel properly. And of course, I'll include all of your information in the caption below, your social media, your podcast, your website. So if you want to work with Lindsay or ask questions, she's amazing. Feel free to shoot her a message. And thank you all for tuning in. This was a lot of fun, and I will see you on the next episode.